On March 30th, 2016, 36-year-old Markia Benson failed to appear for work at a packaging company based in Chester, Pennsylvania. Her absence immediately raised concerns among her colleagues, who noted that she had not signed off or given any prior indication of taking time off. This was out of character for her. That same day, her mother also attempted to reach her but received no response. The lack of communication from Markia set off alarm bells for those closest to her. By late afternoon, the concern deepened. Around 4:30 p.m., Markia's boyfriend and a coworker decided to visit her apartment in Upper Darby Township to check on her well-being. Upon arrival, they found her vehicle parked in the apartment complex's parking lot. Despite knocking on the door, there was no answer. Sensing something was wrong, they approached the building's manager and requested a wellness check. The manager agreed and provided them with a key to enter the unit. As soon as they stepped inside, they were struck by the unsettling scene. Steam filled the apartment. The interior was in complete disarray. Furniture and personal items were scattered, and various parts of the apartment appeared ransacked. Even more disturbing, words conveying anti-feminist sentiments had been written in lipstick across one of the walls. Markia's boyfriend moved quickly toward the bathroom after hearing the sound of running water. Inside, he made a horrifying discovery. Markia was lying lifeless and unclothed in the bathtub. The hot water tap was still on, causing the room to fill with steam. From the moment they saw her, it was clear that she had suffered a violent death. The discovery of Markia Benson's body inside her own apartment set off what would become a complex and deeply troubling homicide investigation, marked by disturbing evidence and unanswered questions. Following the discovery of Markia Benson's body, an autopsy was conducted to determine the exact cause and manner of death. The findings painted a grim and violent picture. The medical examiner reported that Markia had suffered both blunt and sharp force trauma to the head and neck. These injuries were determined to be significant and contributed directly to her death. While the exact weapon used was not specified in the report, the nature of the trauma indicated a sustained and deliberate attack. The autopsy also noted the presence of scald injuries caused by prolonged exposure to extremely hot water. Markia's body had been left submerged in a running bathtub, with the hot water still on when she was found. Investigators confirmed that the water temperature was high enough to cause serious burns over time. Forensic pathologists estimated that the attack likely occurred in the early morning hours, possibly while Markia was preparing for her day. This aligns with the timeline established by her absence at work and lack of communication with her family. One of the most disturbing elements of the report was the possibility that Markia may have still been alive when placed under the hot water. Though unconfirmed, this raised the question of whether the scalding was intended as a method of torture or concealment. There were no signs of sexual assault or defensive wounds reported publicly, but the autopsy findings were enough to classify the case as a homicide. The brutality of the injuries, combined with the act of leaving the hot water running over the body, suggested an act that was not only violent but deeply personal. These clinical details provided the first clear indicators of the severity and intentional nature of the crime. When authorities arrived at Markia Benson's apartment following the discovery of her body, they began a thorough forensic examination of the entire space. The scene presented a disturbing and chaotic environment. The apartment was in clear disarray, especially the living room area. Investigators documented that furniture had been overturned, trash cans were emptied, and various personal items were scattered across the floor. One of the more notable findings was Markia's passport, which had been deliberately torn apart and left among the wreckage. Investigators considered this an unusual and symbolic act. Destroying a personal document of such significance suggested a level of hostility directed not just at Markia physically, but at her identity or lifestyle. It raised the question of whether the killer resented her for being independent or having ambitions to travel. In terms of physical evidence, traces of blood were found in several locations within the apartment. Blood spatter was discovered on the walls, mattress, and pillow, indicating that a significant part of the attack may have taken place in the bedroom. However, the room showed minimal signs of a struggle. This led investigators to believe that the initial assault may have been swift or that Markia was caught off guard. After the initial attack, She was likely moved, either dead or critically injured, into the bathroom where her body was found submerged in scalding water. There were no signs of forced entry, and the door was locked when her boyfriend and coworker arrived. This detail reinforced the theory that Markia likely let the attacker in herself, suggesting that the individual may have been someone she knew or trusted. Combined with the lipstick-written insults on the wall and the vandalized apartment, police interpreted these as strong signs of a personal motive rooted in anger or resentment. The forensic team's assessment was that the killer's actions went far beyond a quick or opportunistic attack. The destruction, the method of murder, and the targeted nature of the evidence painted a portrait of premeditation and emotional intensity. All early findings supported the growing belief that this was not a random act of violence, but a deeply personal crime committed by someone with a direct connection to Markia Benson. As part of their investigation into the murder of Markia Benson, police turned to the surveillance footage from her apartment complex. Investigators hoped that reviewing the building's security cameras might reveal a potential suspect, unknown visitor, or any unusual activity surrounding the time of the crime. Authorities carefully analyzed video recordings from the day of the murder, tracking every individual who entered and exited the complex. Investigators paid particular attention to footage from the early morning hours, which aligned with the estimated time of death established by the autopsy. Their goal was to detect any unfamiliar person who might have entered the building without a clear reason or lingered in areas near Markia's apartment. Despite their thorough review, the surveillance footage did not provide any useful leads. No individuals matching the profile of a possible intruder or acting suspiciously were seen. Everyone captured on video had a legitimate reason to be in the building or was recognized by residents or staff. The absence of visual evidence added a new layer of difficulty to the investigation. Without footage pointing to an unknown suspect, the theory that Markia had willingly let the perpetrator in gained even more weight. The footage, while inconclusive, supported the suspicion that the killer was not a stranger, but someone known to her, someone who entered without raising alarm. This dead end in the surveillance review marked a critical gap in the investigation, leaving police with no clear trail to follow from the building's security system. In the initial stages of the investigation, police turned their attention to Markia Benson's boyfriend, with whom she had maintained an on-and-off relationship for approximately 3 years. Given the intimate nature of their connection and the statistically higher likelihood of a victim knowing their assailant, investigators considered it necessary to thoroughly examine his potential involvement. According to both the boyfriend's account and statements from those close to Markia, including her sister, the relationship was described as loving, stable, and free of conflict. There were no reported incidents of violence or abuse, and no one close to the couple expressed concern about their dynamic. These personal testimonies gave police no reason to assume the boyfriend had a motive for harming Markia. Beyond verbal cooperation, the boyfriend was fully compliant with the investigation. He voluntarily provided his fingerprints and DNA and granted access to his phone records. These records were carefully examined for inconsistencies, suspicious communication, or location discrepancies. However, the analysis revealed nothing of concern. His digital footprint was consistent with his statements, and no forensic evidence linked him to the crime scene. The police concluded that he had no apparent involvement in the murder. Despite being the person who discovered Markia's body alongside a coworker, his reaction, cooperation, and clean record eventually led detectives to rule him out as a suspect. This portion of the investigation helped narrow the focus of the case, as one of the closest individuals in Markia's life had been thoroughly examined and eliminated from suspicion. As investigators continued to examine individuals in Markia Benson's life, their attention briefly turned to a male neighbor living in her apartment complex. Several friends and family members recalled Markia describing the man as creepy and noted a specific incident where he showed up at her door with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Markia, reportedly trying to be polite, shared a glass of wine with him on that occasion. When questioned by police, the neighbor downplayed any relationship with Markia. He claimed they had only encountered each other in the hallway and insisted that he did not even know her name. This contradicted the accounts from Markia's circle, which raised initial suspicion about the man's honesty. Investigators learned that the neighbor had moved into the complex in November 2015, shortly after separating from his wife. However, by the time of the murder, he and his wife had reconciled. Police followed up by interviewing his wife and his employer to establish his whereabouts and daily routine. Both interviews helped confirm that the man had a solid alibi during the estimated time of the crime. Despite the conflicting statements about his relationship with Markia, the lack of physical evidence, combined with verified alibis, led the police to eliminate him as a suspect. The neighbor's odd behavior and vague recollections were not enough to justify further action. This line of inquiry closed with no direct connection between the neighbor and the crime, allowing detectives to refocus their efforts elsewhere. Among the individuals examined during the investigation into Markia Benson's murder, her ex-boyfriend emerged as the most compelling person of interest. The two had been in a relationship from 2009 to 2013, during which time Markia experienced both physical and emotional abuse. Despite the troubling history, it was revealed that she had reconnected with him only weeks before her death. This renewed contact raised concerns for detectives, particularly in light of the couple's past and the emotional complexity of their relationship. After Markia's murder, the ex-boyfriend left multiple angry voicemails, questioning why she was ignoring him. These messages drew immediate attention from investigators, who considered the timing and tone suspicious. However, he voluntarily came to the police station to speak with detectives. He expressed interest in learning about the status of the investigation and agreed to cooperate fully. He provided fingerprints, DNA samples, and access to his phone records. He also shared details about his whereabouts, some of which were confirmed through surveillance footage. Despite his cooperation, police noted that he showed little visible emotion when discussing Markia's death. His demeanor only shifted when investigators challenged inconsistencies in his statements. In response, he offered to take a polygraph test, which was administered and analyzed by two experts. The result was described as indicated deception. Detectives believe the man had a clear motive, rooted in past abuse, recent disputes, and unresolved emotional tension. His presence in her life shortly before the murder, combined with his erratic post-crime behavior, placed him at the center of police attention. Nevertheless, the evidence against him was largely circumstantial. No direct forensic links tied him to the crime scene, and the surveillance footage confirmed portions of his alibi. As a result, investigators were unable to press charges. The ex-boyfriend was never officially named as a suspect, and the case remained open, lacking the definitive proof needed to move forward. This section marks the closest point police came to identifying a possible perpetrator, highlighting the frustrations of working a case with strong suspicions but insufficient evidence. Years after the brutal murder of Markia Benson, the case remains unsolved. Despite a thorough investigation, multiple interviews, forensic testing, and reviews of surveillance footage, authorities have not been able to identify the killer. This ongoing uncertainty has left both Markia's family and the police with deep frustration and unanswered questions. Throughout the years, Markia's loved ones have remained active and vocal, determined not to let her memory fade. They continue to support the efforts of law enforcement while also urging the public to come forward with any information, no matter how small it may seem. Even the slightest tip could help break the case wide open. To support this effort, a public appeal remains open. Anyone who has knowledge related to the crime is encouraged to submit information anonymously. This can be done through a secure editorial channel that is not connected directly to the police, ensuring that individuals can share what they know without fear or exposure. The process is handled entirely by editors, who pass along relevant tips to the appropriate cold case investigators. The police have not closed the case, and investigators still hope that perhaps someone who has stayed silent until now, will step forward. Meanwhile, Markia's family continues to seek answers, driven by a deep sense of love, loss, and the need for justice. This case stands as a solemn reminder of the emotional toll that unsolved crimes have on families and communities. Markia's story is not forgotten, and the search for her killer remains active.